What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the JW Sports Talk Show, where every fan's welcome. We're officially back, ready to rock and roll for our Thursday Night Live. We have a very special guest here tonight. I don't think he needs any introduction. I think as soon as you guys seen who was here, you guys knew who he was. Welcome, Mr. Cody Felger. I appreciate you coming on, man. From Bring the Juice, if you would like to introduce yourself, tell them where they can find you. If they don't know already, I'm sure everyone here knows you already. So just, a quick introduction, tell them where they can find you, where, that kind of stuff. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, man. Appreciate it. If I look a little tired, it's because I just overslept a little bit, so I do apologize for that. But yeah, man, no, appreciate you having me on. I know it feels like it's been a while, but definitely glad to be on nonetheless. And yeah, you can find me pretty much anywhere. You're on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all those places you can find me. You can find me those two places, Instagram and Twitter at CPFelger55. And then pretty much where you listen, anywhere you listen to podcasts, just search Bring the Juice podcast and you'll find us there talking all things Colts. So definitely appreciate the invitation, my friend.
Always. I appreciate you accepting. I know you're very busy. You got lots to do, so I appreciate your time. It's valuable to me. So all that stuff they said, gonna be in the description. I'll add a few things because I only put the YouTube and the X. I'll make sure to put the rest down there once the live is over. So these last couple of weeks, the last week and a half with the Colts, it's been a bit of a roller coaster, hasn't it? So what, about a week ago, we began reports that the Colts and the Chiefs are close. They're close to reaching an offer for L'Jarius Sneed. The Colts, I guess it was something to do with the offer from the Colts. They don't want to give him money, or it was something along those lines. Can you just summarize how this free agency has been for you so far, with all the roller coaster of emotions with L'Jarius Sneed, re-signing all of our guys? Just give me a quick, summary of how your feelings have been so far.
Yeah, I mean, you think you touched on it. It's been a roller coaster because we get the reports coming out about L'Jarius Sneed, and then we get the report that the deal is pretty much done, right? And you're like, okay, like that's great news. That's a great move for the Colts. And then the conflicting reports, and so it's just been. And then you hear different people saying, "Oh, there's never a deal in place," and you're like, the only thing I gotta say, man, is the sources game is a terrible. I would never want to be a part of it just because of that horrible thing of what if I get fed wrong information or inaccurate information. And so I steer clear of that stuff for a reason. And again, I don't know, there's just a lot there. And so I don't even want to really touch on, I guess, that, because I don't know. Who am I to say? But yeah, in terms of the whole idea of the Snead thing, I mean, I think it would be for the draft compensation. Obviously, it would be a great deal for Indianapolis, especially if it is like a third and a future later round pick next year. But the big thing is with the swing, man, is the contract. If L'Jarius Sneed is truly looking to break the market, essentially, for a starting cornerback, you have to weigh, is that risk worth it? And to me, it's worth it because, I mean, you have a rookie quarterback on a deal, on a cheap deal. But then there is the reality, as much as it's annoying and frustrating at times for people, that, hey, you know what? You had an abnormal amount of guys that you had to extend. And that's no excuse because I think you can always mess with the cap, right? But, so how real was the L'Jarius Sneed stuff? I'm not entirely sure. You would just had to do a lot moving around flexibility wise with your roster in order to make that move happen. And so right now, not super shocked because Chris Ballard's done this a lot. I think a lot of people were expecting kind of that big swing early, but that's never really been Chris Ballard, right? He's never really been the guy that's gone out and, made that home run, stepped up to the plate and hit that, home run, or even a lot of times it's triple. He's had a couple moments, where he's had a few of those things, but and I know there were some reports that he was in early on a guy like Danielle Hunter, who ultimately, signed with your division rival. So that's not a great thing. But yeah, when it comes to free agency, I mean, strictly from a depth perspective, I definitely didn't mind the Raekwon Davis move just because you look at last year when Grover Stewart did go down. You saw it was very clear that you didn't have what you needed in terms of that backup type of nose tackle defensive lineman. And then obviously the Joe Flacco move, just having a reliable backup guy who, came out of nowhere. Everybody thought he was done, and he comes out of nowhere and leads, Cleveland to, the playoffs. And so, I don't hate those moves. I guess for me, there's just not a move right now that moves the needle for me. I'd like to see the Colts add a starting safety, and I would obviously love for them to re-sign Julian Blackmon. I mean, corner,
right,
I always felt like personally, man, I was never like the Colts are their number one need is corner. Like I never felt that. I felt like it's still need to me, but I kind of felt like right now I'd rather the Colts get his starting safety, all right, a starting free safety than a starting corner, right? I felt like you saw a lot of good things, even though, there was a lot of lumps as well from, guys like Juju Brents, guys like Jalen Jones. You're getting Dallas Flowers back. You re-sign Kenny Moore. So it's not like the cupboard is necessarily bare there. Would I like to see the Colts still get, a player there potentially? Yeah, absolutely. I do think you need to add some more competition there, especially at that number 2 outside corner. And obviously, you want Juju to stay healthy too. So I just think you need another body in there as well. Maybe even 2. Maybe you get a veteran guy and you go draft a corner even so. But when it comes to safety, I do think that is the biggest question mark right now, because it's probably the one position you can look at right now, at least currently with the guys under contract, and say, I don't know if there's a starter on this roster right now. The only guy I'd argue is Nick Cross, and we saw him in limited action last year. So that's like the biggest thing for me. But I guess I'm at the point, man, where, if you sign one of those free safeties, and there still are a good number of those, a few guys in particular that stand out, and then you do re-sign Julian Blackmon or go get another starting strong safety, I think those need to be the moves personally. And I know you don't have that much cap space left, but I think with how, saturated this market was, you could probably get some of these guys for a semi-decent price. I really do believe that. So I'm personally of the belief, man, that if you can get a, competent or better play from your free safety position, I think that's going to make all the difference in the world. So that's kind of where I stand when it comes to the roster right now. And obviously there's other things I'd like to see the Colts do when it comes to the draft, but I was really hoping that they would add some experience in that secondary. And again, they still could, but at this point, man, I'm like, so who's going to play starting safety for you? I don't really know right now. So we'll see.
Yeah, that's definitely not ideal. A couple of those guys back there don't have much time. On top of that, we all know Gus Bradley's system. They always saying that Gus Bradley's system, it's hard to learn. It's tough in the first year. So I think they should really focus on bringing Julian Blackmon back. Now, he's not like that single high anymore. They moved him to like the kind of like the strong safety type of vibe. And he filled in awesomely for that. But some other guys out there, Justin Simmons is out there. Is that a guy that you have thought about that you want to bring in? Do you think, even though he's 30 years old, I still think he's got a lot left in the tank. Does a guy like Justin Simmons pique your interest?
Yeah, absolutely. Justin Simmons, I think for me, skill-wise, I think he's by far the best safety out there still. So I would absolutely love a guy like Justin Simmons, a guy that's been an all-pro, and it would just be so much of an instant upgrade. And he's 30, but he just turned 30. So I do feel like there still is a decent amount left in the tank. I mean, I feel like especially with safeties, we've seen guys that can play into their mid-30s. And so I do think Justin Simmons, obviously if the price is right there, I think that would be a huge addition for this Indianapolis secondary. Bring some leadership and honestly bringing just some proven talent in there in a position that has talent. Still, I do think there is some talent in there at free safety, but just lacks that experience piece. And so even if it is only a couple-year deal, maybe you think, okay, he can help teach guys, like Nick Cross, Rodney Thomas, those guys like that. How awesome would it be to have a teacher like him? And then the other guy from you would be Quandre Diggs as well. I know he's a little bit older than Justin Simmons, maybe not quite the player that Justin Simmons is, but he does fit, I think, a little bit scheme-wise. He fits really well into what the Colts want to do. I know there was some reported interest between the two sides, so that definitely would be good. And I think he's still a good player in his own right as well. So I think for me, either of those guys would be really, really big upgrades from what the Colts have. But obviously, Justin Simmons is the best player, in my opinion, at the safety position. So would definitely, if I'm having the choice between the two, would go Justin Simmons just because of his accolades. And he's just proven immediate impact, plug and play type of guy. So definitely would like him.
Exactly, I agree. I always believe in the adage of having, just the right amount of veterans and young guys in the room. You need that savviness in the room. You need those veterans giving those young guys the little tips and tricks here and there, watching film, all those little intricacies to the game those veterans know that can, spread that wealth to the young guys and ultimately build for a better future. So another thing that I want to talk about with you is and I would like to get your thoughts on this. I thought this could just be me. Hold on one second. Sorry.
You're
So
good.
I think the Colts mishandled this. I could be completely wrong, but I do think going into the Michael Pittman situation, I think you should have a guy like that locked up and have done before this time even comes around. Do you think that the Colts should have had him done for a while, like last offseason? Like I know that the Colts said or Michael Pittman said that he was okay not playing on a contract and he was okay with that, but I feel like that's a player you should get locked up in the middle of the season, not the end of the season, not wait until the last second. They did do the franchise tag, so that was okay. But did you think that they could have handled that better, like getting him signed earlier, or do you think it just? I mean, he is resigned now, so it's no big deal. But do you think that a player like that we should have had locked up a while before we had to tag him?
Yeah, and again, I guess for me, it's like when I look at where we viewed Michael Pittman a year ago to where now, I do think like if you would have locked him up last year, it probably wouldn't have costed quite as much. But again, you
If
could
there's no
make Michael Pittman can make that argument. Look who's thrown me the football, over the last couple of years, and so I didn't personally have a problem with it, with the way the Colts handled it. They let him kind of explore a little bit, which I think was probably meant a lot to him because it's like, we have this value, but let's see what the market dictates, let's come to an agreement there. So I think that's probably part of the plan there. And obviously they put the tag on because they couldn't quite, come to that final deal before that franchise tag deadline. And then they got it done. So I don't personally have a problem with it. I get what you're saying about that, but I do think they wanted to kind of, because everything was new last year. I mean, everything was new, new quarterback, new offensive guy. And so I think that Shane Steichen, especially in this staff, they wanted to get a good look at Michael Pittman and see what they had and say, hey, is this a guy we want to, pay north of $20 million per year next year? So that's kind of where I'm at. But I was personally okay with it just because of all the different situations. And I think Michael Pittman, honestly, it helped him out. And maybe he did appreciate that. He probably made a lot more this year than he would have last year if you had extended him at this time. So I was okay with it personally.
All right, yeah, that was just something I was thinking of. I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah.
So, the Chris Ballard situation. I love Chris Ballard, and he does a phenomenal job drafting certain positions. Other positions he struggles with, but I kind of feel like Ballard band-aids a lot of times. Like I understand the quarterback situation was pretty bad for a while. I'm I'm I hate bringing this up, but since Andrew Luck, before AR, we always had someone new every year, and it absolutely sucked. But I think Chris Ballard learned a little too late, you know, after Matt Ryan. And then there are a couple of other examples in there, like, cornerback. Like I still feel like he kind of shied away from cornerback and he shied away from a couple positions. And I feel like he kind of waits till the last second to kind of fill in some of those positions. And even just being stubborn. Like, I think that's what I'm trying to get at. Like, I think Chris Ballard is a bit stubborn at times. Like, sometimes we'll go into a week where I think it was last year or the year before, we had a couple of receivers hurt, a couple of stars, like 1 and 2. And, we were just asking Chris Ballard, why don't you go out and sign someone at least, because I don't remember if it was a big game or not. I think it might have been a big game. And we're just like, Ballard, go sign someone, at least get something done. You see other teams go out there and try and get something done quick, and it needs to be done. I just think Chris Ballard is very stubborn at times. And do you kind of see the same thing?
I do. And I think the way I would describe Chris Ballard, I think it's one of his biggest faults as a GM, is I think he's a lot of time reactive instead of proactive. So, he'll, like what I mean by that is I do feel like he doesn't necessarily plan ahead sometimes. And so like when things happen, I feel like it's about every year there's something like this where fans and media and people are saying, you need to address this. And he doesn't. And it comes back to bite the Colts in the butt. I think of the offensive tackle situation a couple of years ago with Matt Pryor and Bernard Ryman. Now, fortunately, that worked out and Ryman, got better. But, we're just add some competent competition in there. And then all of a sudden
Right.
that happens, and, just different things like that where it feels like even corner, you couldn't predict what happened last year at corner. And I know the Colts wanted to play it young, but like you were out there trotting out Daryl Baker. You were out there trotting out Tony Brown. And honestly, dude, I feel like it lost you games because you were not proactive in terms of going and adding, another veteran in there to help stabilize the room. I get it. I'm all for, giving those young guys the reps. You're going to do that. All right, you're going to live with it. But it felt like there was a time and a place for it. And I would rather at that point have a more veteran corner than, guys that frankly couldn't cover anybody and really cost your franchise games and really just should not have been on the field, to be honest with you. And so that is one of my biggest things with Chris Ballard. And again, I don't necessarily look at, the cornerback position like maybe I viewed offensive tackle a couple of years ago, just because I do think there are some young guys that you betted on that, but also I think it could help you out in the long run because these guys have experience now. They're only going to get better, you think. So I feel all right about it. But yeah, that's been my biggest gripe with Chris Ballard, and especially if the safety room continues how it is, it's just this kind of blind faith in guys that haven't proven it consistently and not really giving another option, so if it doesn't work out, you are putting a ton of pressure on these young guys. And if it doesn't work out, it's going to hurt your football team again, and I just really felt like, man, this is the time, like this year and the next couple years, to go make a little bit of a bigger type of swing. Like, I'm not asking you to go do what Ryan Grigson did, right? When he went and signed Andre Johnson, Frank Gore, all those guys. But I think just like a swing, at one of these premium positions, especially a position like pass rusher, where you have not been able to hit, right? And that's kind of my biggest thing is like, if you're the Colts and you have invested, I've lost count how many, multiple day 1, day 2 picks on pass rushers, and here you are, and you still don't have that true number one guy. I would think after a while, you would just be like, you know what? Like, we've had success trading for guys and signing guys on the defensive line. That's the route we're going to go. And so that's kind of what my biggest thing was, is that, you can look at the sacks last year. I know a lot of people talk about, franchise record in sacks, but when you dive a little bit deeper, it's not as, I guess, impressive when you look at it from a little bit of a deeper percentage, like pass rush rate and all that stuff. And so I still do think is a need. And now I think just the fact that you haven't really addressed any of these perceived needs in free agency, I mean, it just puts more pressure on you to get this draft right. Like, it just does. Like, and there is kind of that, are you pigeonholing yourself into certain positions that if you were just a little bit more active in free agency, might not even be a position of need you have to consider. So that's kind of one of my things that it is a little frustrating when it's like you have the chance to add a guy. I'm not asking you to go, below 50 million, but what I am saying is like there are reasonable deals that you could be handing out that could honestly improve your football team. And it won't be that detrimental to you if you go and sign a guy who's a complete bust, right? So I just want to know that the attempt is made there, and I think that's where probably Colts fans are frustrated, because it doesn't even seem like there's an attempt sometimes to improve this roster and add some competition and add some talent that's going to take your team from how close it was to the playoffs to actually being a legitimate threat. And I think that's probably where the fans had the biggest hang up when it comes to it. Now, again, I understand, a lot of your rookie class last year was injured. So including your franchise guy, you're playing the majority of the season with a backup quarterback, a backup running back. And so you say, hey, if you add those guys on top of another draft class, okay, maybe you feel a lot better about that. But I don't know. For me, I'm like, I always am wanting to add competition to this roster. And so it is a little frustrating when you see some of these positions where you're like, are we going to go into another offseason next year and say this is a need again? Because it feels like there's those certain positions where we say the same need about every year. And maybe it's addressed sort of, but not fully addressed like it probably should be. So that's kind of where I stand on the whole Chris Ballard thing. And I'm getting to the point, man, where it's like, I mean, it's year 8. We haven't won anything yet. Like, it's time to crap or get off the pot, for lack of a better term. Like, it's time to do something. Now, I'll fully admit, I understand it is a little contrary, though, when you say, hey, do something, but here's the amount. You have like $10 million you could spend. So it's not like you have this exorbitant amount of cap space. It's not like you had, 50, 60 million this year and you didn't do anything with it. You still spent it, but you spent it internally. And that's a lot less flashy, right? And that's a lot less, exciting for fans to see. And fans are frustrated, at the fact that the Colts are doing that. And yeah, I'd like to see the Colts go out and sign, some quality safeties. But I guess for me, it's like, but if you don't re-sign these guys, then you have another hole, another issue there at slot corner or defensive tackle or, insert whatever position you want to there of guys they re-sign. So I get the frustration by fans and I share it to a degree, but also I understand the reality of where the Colts are at right now. So I'm all right with what they did personally. I'm all right with them not, necessarily taking the swing with Snead because that would be a lot and you wouldn't probably be able to sign a quality safety then. So, but we'll have to see how that plays out, man. But I definitely think if we come back to this conversation and it's draft time and then you still have no legitimate answers at safety, that's when we're like, okay, what are we doing here? Like, this is getting a little ridiculous.
Right. Every single year we hear the same thing from him. It takes time to build this great team. It takes time to build chemistry, and it does. But like you said, 8 years later, I get it. How many GMs have to deal with what he went through with Andrew Luck and all that. But at the end of the day, it's what? It's been quite some time since that happened, and it's time to move on. Obviously, we moved on, but it's time to, and we don't even bring that excuse up anymore because it's not an excuse that you can use. All these quarterbacks you keep signing and stuff, and it's just like, yeah, it takes time, but at the same time, you kind of have to go out there and break the mold a little bit. If you don't break that mold, and this is something that I don't remember if Frank Reich or Chris Ballard said it. One of them said that, making that leap from good to great is the hardest leap to make. And sometimes you have to break the boundary or you have to do something a little different. And I don't see Chris Ballard doing anything a little different. Sometimes you see GMs and something's not working out. Okay, they try something different. I see Chris Ballard doing the same thing every single year. And I agree with you. He does some great things. And I love that he's patient. And I love that he doesn't always just, trade for the best players out there. There is a balance. There's a fine line in taking a swing at it or just taking a swing blindly. Chris Ballard, he analyzes everything, but at the same time, I think he's got too big of a heart. I always see the guys that he drafted and he kind of holds on to them too long and they're not producing this long. I think he always wants his guys to work out instead of, because he always says, he doesn't really want to bring other people in to upset his guys. So I love Chris Ballard. Does he have too big of a heart for this job? And that's a question I ask sometimes that I genuinely have. So, all right, I just completely lost my train of thought. It happens all the time. Every time I'm on a show, it always happens. But we'll just move on to the next thing. So, looking at the Colts roster, I know we didn't really touch into any major needs, but we talked safety, so we did talk about major needs. So, other than safety, because we already talked about that, what other position hole should we look into for the draft at 15?
Yeah. So a couple that I have in mind because like I said, we did hear the Colts were very interested in Danielle Hunter. So to me, that doesn't rule out pass rush. Like I think that could be a reality where, and I personally, if I'm making the choice and a couple of these guys are available, like Dallas Turner, Jared Verse, any of those guys, Latu. I know there's some medical concerns there, but any of those type of guys that are sitting there, I would be all for the Colts going after one of those guys because I do think it still is another need. Now, this is my biggest, I could totally see Chris Ballard rationalizing in his head. We got a new defensive line coach. We got another year of the secondary. I could see him as much as I disagree with it, I could see him rationalizing that because reality is, you said they have invested a ton into the defensive line. And so are they is it more of a coaching thing? Right. And are they counting on guys like Dio Dangbo, Kwity Paye, as much as those guys showed flashes, they weren't consistent last year. So are they saying we just need the right guy in there and we think these guys can take it to another level? Or are they proactive, which is a big if, because I don't know if they'll do this, but are they proactive in saying edge rush was good, but we need more. we still lack that true alpha in that pass rush. And if one of these guys they deem is that alpha type of guy, I would say that is a move that you need to make, and I would be totally fine with that because, I mean, I think you can make the argument both ways, right? The pass rush's best friend is good coverage, and a cornerback's best friend is good pass rush. Like I do think those things go hand in hand. So I guess it depends how you look at it. Some people say, well, if you get a true guy that can shut down half the field, that's going to help your pass rush out a lot. Yeah, that's true. But if you get consistent pass rush, that's going to help out your young corners as well. So I can make the argument both ways. I do think the draft is very top heavy when it comes to some of these pass rushers. So I think there will realistically be a couple guys there at 15 that Indy could go after. A couple other positions. I already mentioned corner as well. There are a ton of corners. So I think you could easily trade back, get another, day 2 pick or day 3 pick and still get a quality corner at that position. Obviously, we talk about safety, so I know a guy like Cooper DeJean is very much an option on the table. And then when you move to the offense, I think just offensive weapon. I think this wide receiver class, I would be shocked, man, if the Colts take definitely. I think they're going to take at least one, if not 2 wide receivers in this draft. I know a lot of guys have looked at guys like Brian Thomas from LSU. Xavier Worthy, I know, is a guy that broke that combine record, and everybody's looking at him. Adonai Mitchell. I mean, the list goes on, and that's not even some of the top guys there. I know there's some people who said the Colts need to trade up and go get a guy like Roma Dunze. So there's a lot of options here, and I think that bodes well for Indy just because the Colts have their number one guy. Now, is he number one receiver? I personally think so, but if you truly have another guy on the other side of the field with Michael Pittman, how much better could that make your offense? I mean, seriously, as much as I'm an Alec Pierce defender, some of these guys in this draft, Alec Pierce would not beat out for that number 2 spot. Let's just be honest with you. So, but yeah, so I think just an offensive weapon, I would be totally fine with. I know a lot of people say Brock Bowers. We'll see if he's there. I have this feeling one of these teams, whether it's the Chargers, whether it's the Jets, one of these teams is going to take him. And I would hope not, because Brock Bowers, I think, is a great player at a position that we're not really talking about as a need. But I mean, he's just a weapon, and in general, you can line him up anywhere. So I would say for me, those are probably some of the positions that I'm looking at for Indy. And again, I would say if I'm looking at probably the biggest needs, I would probably say for me on the defense is pass rusher for me personally, and on offense is a playmaker of any kind. I'm good with wide receiver or tight end. Yeah. I think if you're going the wide receiver route, I would probably be more inclined, unless there's a guy you just cannot pass up, I would be more inclined to say, hey, trade back. And that's probably why I'm more of the take, the edge rusher in the round 1, because there's bound to be a couple good receivers when you're picking in the second round, even the third round, right? We got
wonder who we got in the third round last year. Yeah.
This draft class is supposed to be even better than last year. So I guess for me, I look at that and I say, if you can do that, that would be great, man. That would be absolutely great. Get a guy that's a little bit of different skill set than what you currently have. More of that, I guess, the guy that you can just give the ball and let him go to work. That guy that's just the yards after catch type of guy. Josh Downs to a degree has that, but I think you truly lack that explosive Xavier Worthy type of player. I think that's kind of the biggest thing, that I would say, and obviously he's an elite player for a reason, but the Tyreek Hill kind of player where you can just throw him the ball and he'll go create plays in space, like that kind of guy. I think that's kind of the last element of the wide receiver room, right, that you're lacking, because you got the power forwards, you got Pittman, you got Pierce, you got the slot guy in Josh Downs. I think if you get one more guy with that skill set, I do really feel like this wide receiver core is going to be a great asset to Anthony Richardson this year. So that's where I currently stand on it. But again, corner safety, toss it up there. I'd still holding out faith the Colts won't even have to address safety, because they'll go draft a guy, or they'll go and sign a guy, But I guess we'll see on that. So draft-wise, yeah, probably those positions for me.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to talk about Brock Bowers a little bit more. I had a scouting buddy on last week, so credit to him. He's the one that talked about him and gave me some of this information. So for as long as he's been studying, he has Brock Bowers at a Hall of Fame, great. And I'm like, what? That's a thing? And I'm like, And he's like, yeah, Brock Bowers, a generational guy. He does all these great things. And I would not be opposed to Brock Bowers. Just imagine Brock Bowers and Jelani Woods on the field at the same time. That would be awesome. And you know what? Those are two guys that can help block for running. Those are two guys that can catch the ball short. They can catch short and make plays after the catch. But obviously, like you said, they're not really those guys that are going to make, that are elite in that category, making plays with the catch like the guy you're looking for. But Brock Bowers, man, Brock Bowers and Jelani Woods would be incredible to watch together. Just incredible. And then Kylan Granson makes a couple nice plays here and there as well. And the other kid we have from Miami, my mind's blanking.
Will Mallory,
Yep. He made a few nice plays. He had a few nice games last year. So that would be awesome. And one of Anthony Richardson's strengths is throwing the ball short. So if you get a couple big targets in there, Jelani Woods and Brock Bowers, if he's overthrowing those guys, then we really have a problem. But you know what? That's the next thing. Anthony Richardson. I'm not a big Anthony Richardson fan, and I don't think he's the answer. I want to hear your take on it.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, I think he showed you, man. And I get it. His playing style, that's the biggest question mark, right? Can he stay healthy? That's the biggest hesitation. But I think he showed, man, that he was ahead of progress last year. I really do. Just the amount of touchdowns in the short amount of period of time. For me, it was like, man, I mean, this guy has got it. He's got something. Now, again, not the most polished passer. I totally understand that. But I do think with another year in Shane Steichen's system, a full off season now being a pro, I do think he's just going to get better. For me, the question isn't the ability, can he play the position? I think it's just, can he stay healthy playing the position? And I do think he can. And the crazy thing is, man, for me is Richardson's still only going to be 21 years old. So he is so young and has so much potential still. And I think it's just a bummer that we saw him miss so much time so early. And so I totally understand, the people who say, I don't know how to feel about Anthony Richardson, because you can have all the talent in the world, but if you're not available, then it doesn't matter. And so, yeah, for me, I don't know. I've seen enough so far in the limited time where I'm I think he was ahead of schedule than from what was expected of him last year. And so I'm just have another year in the system. I do think he has all the makeups to be a type of, a franchise type of guy. But again, I guess we'll have to see, because we just haven't seen enough for Anthony Richardson. And so while the hype is certainly there for a good reason, I can't go and say he's definitively going to be the answer, because we just really haven't seen it. The things you've seen have been pretty, I would say, encouraging. But again, that's only, not even, 4 games, and he was injured. So if that's going to continue to be an issue, then we got a problem, and we got to figure that out. But again, only year number 1. So crap like that happens all the time with guys. I mean, like we saw with Joe Burrow, that happened out of nowhere. And, so I'm not quite ready to say I don't think he's the guy. I just think we don't know at this point. I think he's got the potential, and I just want to see it play out. I want to see it play out, and if it does, and he can stay healthy, I do believe that, kind of his background, his makeup, and then Shane Steichen, I do believe they can figure it out. But that is the ultimate question, isn't it? And injuries, they suck, man. They're terrible. And so you just would like to see AR full season with Shane Steichen this year. And then I think if you see a full season, you can make an honest evaluation. But it's hard for me to make an honest evaluation as of now. But certainly was encouraged. But yeah, you got to see more. You just got to see more.
I agree. So by what you just said, you're probably going to say no. But would you be opposed to drafting a high, a high ceiling guy? Well, Anthony Richardson is a high ceiling guy, but you have Joe Flacco in there to teach both of them, if it's Anthony Richardson and this other kid. Would you be opposed to drafting a quarterback that has some nice skills? He's a little raw himself, but he'll sit behind Flacco while AR tries to figure it out. Would you be opposed to an insurance policy at QB in rounds 3 to 5?
That might be a little rich for me. I'd probably go round 5 or 6, or 5 through 7 probably is where I'd go for that. So I know a lot of people, have looked at a few different guys that they're like, the potential's there. He's got the physical tools. I would probably go more of that route. Yeah, kind of like AR, but obviously a lot less polished at this point. So I would not be opposed to that, to be honest with you. As much as I think Joe Flacco's a quality backup, I mean, the reality is, like, I would personally, if you don't, aren't 100% sure if AR can stay healthy, I want a guy that potentially you could turn to, if you need it. So I would not hate it if the Colts went after a guy, because even when they had Carson Wentz, right, they went out and they drafted Sam Ellinger, and so as their backup. Now, again, I'd like a guy with a little bit more upside than Sam Ellinger for sure. But no, I wouldn't mind that at all. I really wouldn't mind that at all, because I'm like, hey, you know what? Like, get those guys in there for AR and this other quarterback and just let them learn from Joe Flacco. So no, I'm pretty good with that, because if Shane Steichen he's the guy that you brought in that you truly believe can develop these guys, why not give him as many ingredients in the kitchen as you can? So I'm good with it. I would be fine with it. Now, who is that going to be? I don't know. But yeah, I mean, there are some guys. Joe Milton is a guy that I know a lot of people have talked about out of Tennessee. He's very controversial. Even Tennessee fans say, don't draft this kid. But, I mean, dude, you can't deny the arm strength and the talent of Joe Milton. So you're like, can you get, in a good situation, could you potentially develop this guy into being, at the worst, a quality backup quarterback? So, no, I'm not opposed to it at all, especially if you're like, hey, we have this guy that his bread and butter is developing these young raw quarterbacks. So why not? So I'd be good with it.
I agree with you. Yeah, what you said a little bit about Shane Steichen that reminded me, we have a guy here that helped develop some incredible quarterbacks to play at their highest level, like Jalen Hurts and Justin Herbert. Could he do that with Anthony Richardson? We sure hope so. Will he? We don't know. But that actually kind of brings me back to another point where I lost my train of thought. After this year, if Chris Ballard, if we missed the playoffs, just say Chris Ballard's gone, we're in the same conversation next year. I would absolutely love, if he would like to do it, Shane Steichen to step up and play GM as well. Because I think Shane Steichen is kind of like assertive, as Chris Ballard said a couple of times, like Shane Steichen's like, yeah, come on, let's get this guy, and he's nagging Chris to get this certain guy. I think Shane Steichen would be an awesome GM, or at least get Shane Steichen's input on a guy to be GM, because I think Shane Steichen has a great mind to be head coach and GM.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And again, I think there's certainly you'd want to get his input. No question about that. Now, is that too much? Also doing that and calling the plays? Maybe a little bit, but yeah, no, I can see what you're saying about getting Shane's input. And obviously Shane has a ton of connections with different guys. If Chris Ballard and this thing just doesn't work out, which, if that doesn't work out, that would suck if Shane Steichen was, and I don't think it would be, but it's like, hey, like, you can't blame Shane Steichen for this if, the GM's not getting him the proper things he needs. And so, but again, that's all hypothetical. But yeah, no, I would be totally all right with Shane having a lot of input into who that next guy would be. It is kind of a little unprecedented, though, to have your coach, being a part of that process. I feel like the Colts have never really done it the way maybe necessarily that we're used to, because, I mean, Chris Ballard's on his third head coach now, which is crazy. Again, I know he was kind of stuck with Pagano that first year, and then Frank Reich, and now Shane Steichen. So I do think this is the year for him, and that's why I think it's so puzzling to see the Colts sit on their hands. Is like, does Chris Ballard not realize that his seat's getting a little warm here? Like, is he just content to run it back again? And it's just puzzling in that way. But yeah, no, I would be all right I would be good with Shane Steichen giving some input if that's what it came to.
Yeah, I agree. I love Shane Steichen, and that's another thing I'm worried about. Like, if Chris, his seat is hot and everything, I'm worried. If Chris Ballard is gone, and then we bring in another GM, and that GM is like, no, I want my guy. That's something I'm kind of worried about, because Shane Steichen, just having 2 years under the belt, like, from what we've seen in year one, where, like, Shane Steichen is awesome. He's incredible. Like, he's done something we haven't seen in many, many years. Like, as soon as players are dropping the ball or fumbling, he's benching, you're out. We're not dealing with that. And that's why I really like Shane Steichen. He holds that accountability and all that kind of stuff. So, I would not be opposed to Shane Steichen, taking the GM spot. And, but like you said, it's that doesn't really happen. Once in a blue moon, we see it. But Shane Steichen is just a guy that's just going to get things done and, make sure he has what he needs. But hopefully, the GM that we hire next, if Chris Ballard doesn't work out after this year, if he ends up being gone, I just hope that next GM keeps him, because so many GMs want their own guy.
You're right. Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
go ahead. Did you have
Oh
something
no,
else to
you're
say
good.
or no? All right.
Nope, you're good.
So just a couple questions here. Not really football related. Some of them are, some of them aren't. Just want to for our last little bit of the podcast. Do this kind of relates to scouting combine, that kind of stuff. Do you believe in aliens and there being more in like outer space?
Oh, that's a great question. I did not expect that. Oh, I guess I'm open to it. Like, I'm open to it. I'm not like this person that I would say is like strictly one way or another. I don't think for me it necessarily changes my worldview one way or another. If that does happen, I feel like I've had this conversation a lot, and I've heard, I've heard both sides of the argument, and so I get both sides of the argument. But I don't know. For me, I'm like, I mean, there's a huge universe out there, right? So it's like, man, is there, it would be kind of crazy that if there was nothing out there. So I'm open to it, I would say. But again, I don't know. I can see both sides of it, I guess. Sorry to kind of play the middle there, but
No, you're good. I'm just asking a crazy question throughout there, just
yeah, no,
kind of
no,
related to the combine and stuff, and
yeah,
change things
yeah.
up a little
I thought
bit
you were
because
gonna
I'm sure.
go. I thought you were gonna say something about the guys that they call like the aliens who are just like insane athletes that nobody sees. I thought you were going that direction, but yeah,
No, because I'm sure you talking about bring the juice, and you have so many channels. It's like you're always talking about the same stuff. Like, why not just ask? Throw
yeah.
throw you a couple curveballs.
Oh no, for
So
sure. Yeah,
something I do want to
I'm
go ahead.
actually
Sorry.
like kind of thinking about, hey, is there other stuff outside of football that I want to talk about? And it's been something I've been thinking about. Like I'm a kid that
Yeah.
grew up in the 90s, 2000s, all that good stuff. And so I'm like, hey, I have a lot of like nostalgic stuff that I really enjoyed back in the day. And like I watch different YouTubers and stuff that talk about that stuff. And I'm like, I could talk about this stuff. So I've thought about it. I've kind of thrown that around because trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my channel exactly. It's that other channel because I do just like NFL right now, franchise mode stuff. But
Yeah.
I'm
Saw that.
thinking about some other stuff, man. That's not football related because especially when you're like Chris Ballard, you're going to make me pull my hair out. You were so frustrating. You're so stuck in your ways, and I almost sometimes
Right.
just want to like slap you awake and just be like, get a grip, man. Like do something. And so
Yeah.
sometimes I have to step away from Twitter because like Colts Twitter it's interesting and it's exhausting. And so it's like talking about something else that's not contingent on signing free agents and having a GM
Yeah.
that doesn't do it. It's just it's a little different. So I've been throwing that around a little
Right.
bit.
Right, so that's kind of perfect. You kind of brought us to, the perfect point here. I wanted to ask you about Wildcat, having him on your show. Man,
Yeah.
that had to be awesome and surreal. He's a huge YouTuber. Like, I never knew he was a Colts fan. I'm sure you just found out recently before you got him on your pod. Unless you knew that for a while, you might have. But how is that having a YouTuber with what 10 plus million subscribers? Like, that's absurd. Like, some of the more
Yeah.
popular figures in the world have like 3, 4, 5 million. Just having someone that serious on that had to be just an incredible experience.
Yeah, I tell you, Wildcat's the best. He's great. For a guy that you're like, this dude has what 10 million subscribers or whatever you said, like you wouldn't think it if you met the guy. Like he is so humble, he's so
Yeah.
chill, like he's just a normal dude. And that's what I appreciate the most about him is, even though he has all this success and a lot of people like when people found out about it, they're like, I've been watching Wildcat for years. And I'm like, and for me personally, it's kind of crazy. I had never watched Wildcat before. So like I didn't even really know who he was. And Derek like is a huge fan of him. And so I was like, okay, like sweet. And so, but no, he's awesome, man. He's great. And I'm glad that he's so passionate as well. Cause he'll sometimes pop into my conversations or different people who are commenting on something I said. And he's so interactive and stuff. And so he's awesome, man. If you get the chance to talk to him, he's great.
That is awesome. That is awesome. And talking about your Colts days, so coming up for Bring the Juice, that has to be such an incredible accomplishment. Like for what it has turned into. Like I know you get a lot of more crazy people and people that are hard to deal with on the internet, of course, but that
Yeah.
that comes with it. But just I remember seeing you guys reaching 1,000 for the first time. Then you get hit 10,000, and now you're 2,000 away from 20,000. Tell me,
Yeah.
tell me a little bit how that's been.
Oh, it's been a journey, man. It's been really cool. Yeah, like I said, like, I mean, 2020, we just had reached 1,000 right before COVID happened. And we're like, oh man, like, I can't believe we reached 1,000. Like when I legitimately created the Bring the Juice channel back in 2019, I was like, there's no way I'm ever going to get 1,000 people to like our stuff, like to subscribe and come back. Like, I was like, there's no way. And so I looked at that as like, that would be a dream, but I'm just doing it because I love it. And I just can't help but talk about the Colts. And so started that, right at the beginning of 2019. I think our first game was the Texans game when the Colts won in the playoffs, the wild card game, their last playoff win, ironically enough, with Andrew Luck. And so that kind of started it off. And man, it's been just such a cool journey throughout the years. And there's definitely been some ups and some downs. I mean, there's definitely years that are better than others. I would be honest, man, like 2023 was kind of a down year for us in certain ways, it was just like a weird thing. It was like, it just felt like there was, people that used to tune in that weren't really tuning in anymore. And, it is frustrating. I know it's kind of like, well, you have 18,000 or whatever. So, how could you be discouraged by that? But it always is something that, wherever you're at, if you're, 5 subscribers, or if you're at, 50,000 subscribers, there is that part of you that is, comparing and you are in certain ways, like, you are comparing and you are competitive in that way. And so it is something that I've always had to battle, is just that comparison game and stuff. But
It's tough.
Yeah, saying that is like, man, it's just, we're very grateful. I never thought 1,000 people, much less 18,000 people would find my opinion and Derek's opinion worthy of listening to, but we really do appreciate it. And it's been really cool. And it's just been a really unique journey over the years. And it really is something that started from ground zero, man. And so it's something that it really has been, our work and our baby for the last number of years,
Right.
And I think we're like year number 5 now of it, which is just crazy. I think it's been half a decade now that we've been covering this team, and you've seen a lot of highs and lows, but yeah, man, wouldn't want to be doing anything else with anyone else. And so I'm very thankful personally for where we're at. And a lot of cool memories along the way so far, and so we're excited where we're going. We're excited where the team is going as well. And so we're hoping, man, at some point when we're covering this team, man, our goal would be to actually go to a Super Bowl, to actually be there in person for a Super Bowl. We have some other goals, like, being doing a live stream from Lucas Oil at some point. Like, I know we threw that around a number of years ago, like that kind of stuff. And so we're just continuing to try to push that and kind of do something that's a little bit unprecedented, man, when it comes to trying to get in with, some of the media and some of that stuff that really, that's not really a thing that's on the table right now for a lot of podcasters, and a lot of people that create content and honestly do just as good, if not better, than certain, people in the media. So it's like, we're just trying to work towards that. Again, we just do this thing for fun. We're just a couple of normal guys, but we absolutely love it. And we try to work our butts off at times to really get the best content out there, man, for people. It's a grind, man. When you say we're going to do this thing, you got to be ready for it, man. Because I tell you, man, there are definitely days, and there was early on in our first year, where Derek and I were like, should we do this thing? Like, why, we seriously considered hanging it up, like, for a little bit of time. We took like 3 or 4 months in the middle of the season, and we were just like, if we're not, are we passionate about this? And I'm very glad we were, because here we are. But that's, I guess, what I would say is, like, I've been there to the point where you're discouraged and you're like, hey, I don't know if it's worth my time and effort and energy, because it is a lot of time. It is a big commitment to do that. So, you get that as well as anybody, and so
absolutely.
But man, I would say it is worth it, just continuing to push and grind. And, we were just fortunate enough, despite the fact that COVID was so bad for so many people, it was so good for us in terms of content, because people were stuck at home and they wanted to talk about the Colts and they wanted content.
Exactly.
And I don't think there was really like a market on YouTube at that point for it. And so, we're like, hey, let's do it. We're stuck at home anyway. We might as well talk about something that we love. And so, that the rest is history from there. So, yeah, man, it's cool to look back, but think, gosh, that was 4 years ago now. That's crazy.
I bet. I bet, yeah, it's gotta be an awesome experience. So how did you and Derek actually like I think Derek told me this story before. You might have even said it before. I don't think so. I think I asked Derek. How did you guys even like, think, hey, let's start a podcast with you were Derek, hey, let's start a podcast with this dude. Before you
Yeah.
know it, and you guys compliment each other so well. Like Derek's like very like vocal. He's like he don't care what. And I know you both don't care, but Derek's just very like he's a little bit more expressive, but you're kind of just like laid back. Yeah, I know. I know what I believe in, and you guys
Mhm.
compliment each other awesomely. So how'd you guys even like come together to say, hey, let's do a podcast?
Yeah, so I started it back, like I said, 29, right at the start of 2019. I started it. I had kind of done some podcasting a little bit off and on. I don't even know if it's still like up, but it was like back in 2017. I did it a little bit. It sounded horrible. It was terrible. I'm glad that nobody could find it anymore. It was just, but no, that was kind of the starting stage. And then it was very inconsistent. I just did audio. So, like, I kind of had an idea but didn't really fully know what that meant. And I just remember, like, I was like, I'm going to do this thing, like I want to start this thing. Had no clue what I was doing at all. But I had a friend that we did podcasts every so often. I would just have different people on that I knew from the Colts world, just on the podcast every so often, but didn't really have a consistent person probably for a good half a year or so. And so it was kind of, the podcast at that point, it was once every week, if that. It was very inconsistent. The typical podcast formula that you see from different people is like an episode a week. And that's what we did for a while. An episode a week for around an hour. That was kind of the format and how we did it for a while. And I remember I was looking for somebody consistent because I just didn't have that, right? I had people that would come on, but nobody would commit to being like that person. And so I just sent something out on Twitter. I said, hey, I'm looking for a co-host. And I think Derek's was like the first one I saw. And I was like, all right, sounds good. And so we tried it out. And yeah, I mean, we loved it ever since. And again, that first year was not easy. Like I said, like that first year, it was tough, man. It was really tough. Personally, I was going through a lot that year. A lot with my job and just different things like that. And just wasn't in a good headspace for that first year, and that on top of the Colts, the whole Andrew Luck thing, the season that fell apart, all that stuff. It was honestly, it was not a great place. And so we had to make that decision. And then we came back and we said, okay, here's what we're going to do. I had moved back at that point to my parents' place, and we were like, okay, like I guess we'll start doing this thing again. And then we really started picking it up right around March time when free agency happened and everything. And yeah, then COVID happened, and then we're like, okay, and we just kind of went from there, man. And I think honestly, that jump that we saw during that COVID time, during like the first wave of free agency for the Colts, when they were signing guys like Xavier Rhodes, Phillip Rivers, trading for DeForest Buckner, that was kind of the first thing for us that really, I guess, like made us think, okay, we can actually do this thing and actually legitimately have an audience, reach people, and have people keep coming back for it. And so that was kind of the start of it. And then from there, we've adapted each year, and I feel like we've tried to improve over the years and make the quality better, do those sorts of things. And I know Derek's had some moves in life, some changes in life. I've certainly had some changes in life, and but still, we still love what we do, and we're back, and and it's just crazy to think, man. In certain ways, it feels like we've been doing it forever, because we were so different back then. I mean, you can even go see physically, we were so different back then. Like, we look like babies compared to now. But yeah, man, I think it just does build that bond after a while where you're like, we've just been doing this. Like, let's just keep going, man. Let's keep building on what we're doing. So
And
yeah, that's kind of how we met. It was honestly the power of the internet. That's how we met.
yeah, that's awesome. No, 4 years later, little did you know you would have almost 20,000 subscribers on your channel. It's
Yeah.
it's awesome. It shows what hard work could do, though. You put in the work, you work hard, and the man upstairs will reward you. And so two more. As a kid, right? There's always someone that someone has that they kind of look up to, or they say something maybe a teacher, a family member, someone. Is there something that you still have with you today, a quote or something that someone said to you as you were a kid? Do you still have that with you, and does it what made the most impact on you? Do you know what I'm
Mm.
trying to ask? Did I ask that well or no?
I think so, yeah. And this was, I guess I still was a kid, but this was my senior year of high school.
Okay.
I remember somebody that was in my life that was super impactful. They basically told me, Cody, you're a leader. Like you're a leader, and you need to step it up, and you need to stand out. And you can do that. You have all that you need to be a leader. And do that. And honestly, man, for good majority of my life, especially middle school and high school, as terrible as those things can be, I was a follower. Like I played sports. I did all the stuff, but I just wanted to be ultimately just fit in at that point. And it really wasn't until my senior year when really, man, like that's when I've always that's always stuck with me, because now I have the opportunity in what I do, to call that out in other people as well, and say you're a leader. These are the things that you've been blessed with, that you can do. These are the people you can influence for good, and that's just something that's always stuck with me, is just somebody who called it out in me and saw it when I didn't see it in myself. And that was just so impactful for me. And I'm honestly like, man, I wish I would have gotten it back in, elementary school or middle school. So now I would have lived my life a lot differently. I really would have. But you
Well,
learn
you
from it. That's
learn
part
from
of
those
the experience. So,
Exactly.
so that's something that's always just stuck out to me. Just the knowing that somebody believed in me and knew and called out something that they knew I could do and be before I even knew it.
Yeah, yeah. See, I always feel like there's someone like that you have, or something from someone that you remember that always sticks with you, that you keep with you, and it kind of keeps you going in a way. It kind of gets you started, get you going. And I feel like no, not a lot of people ask about those things because they want to ask about the big things, but to get to those big things, for you to appreciate those big things, those little things need to become the big things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like like those little things, you need to appreciate the little things as big things before you can truly appreciate the big things. That's what I've
Mm,
learned. So,
absolutely. That's good.
uh, so so I was gonna ask the question, if there was one message you could walk away from this podcast to give to someone that doesn't know, you know, where they are today, say they're down, they're in a rough spot,
Hmm.
what what message would you give to those people?
Yeah, man. I mean, I think the thing that keeps me going is knowing that there's something out there that's bigger than me. And there's something out there, and there's someone out there. I mean, you read the sign. So, I
Yes, sir.
personally, I believe in Jesus. I believe that's my faith is very important to me. I mentioned it, I alluded to it earlier, but the person that influenced me was my youth pastor. He really called that out in me back when I was a senior. Didn't know what in the world that meant at that time, but now I look back on it, I'm very grateful. And so I'm a youth pastor as well. And so now I can call that out in other students. I can call and they all have that potential. I see it in them. But just to get them to get it, that's the process. And so, but I think the thing, man, that was just the most freeing to me is that my responsibility is not to make sure everything happens the way that I want it. My responsibility is to be faithful to the things that I'm called to, to be faithful in, And so for those people who are struggling in that, I think understanding the fact that you don't have to figure it all out yourself, like through the good and the bad, there is a purpose in that. There is a purpose, and there's something to learn through that. And there is hope. I mean, there is hope. I mean, I feel like just this time of year with the cold, the darkness, there can be a lot of hopelessness out there, And so just understanding there is hope there, and there are people that care about you, and there is that hope in the darkness, that light in the darkness, if you will. So that's something I always try to spread, just that positivity, and ultimately, like my sign says, like I'm not king, Jesus is king, and so I always want to. That just helps me out to realize that, oh, I'm not king, so I don't get to call the shots, and that's something that I've honestly, with the podcast, it can become easy to try to call the shots,
Yeah.
like, cause you like stuff a certain way, you want, or you're like, hey, I want to do this with my life, but God has other plans. You know, he's like, but I'm calling you to this as well. So that's been a good balance thing I've had to figure out, is that it's bigger than me. You know, like you said, he definitely has blessed us and where we're at, but it wouldn't have happened. None of it. We wouldn't be where we're at without him. So that's what I would say, man.
Yeah. All right, then. That's going to be it for this show. Truly appreciate you coming on, Cody, and sharing some of your experiences, giving that message. Because me myself, I'm always looking to learn too, and I always like hearing other people's stories. And there's always someone or something that no one asks about that's important or that means a lot to that person. So I wanted to ask you that, and I wanted to, learn from it, but also realize that the small things are important. The small things are important.
Absolutely.
So if there's anything that you want to give out there, if you want to plug something real quick, like you have something coming up, or if you just want to shout out your stuff one more time, and then we'll get out of here. Any last words?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Yeah. So I'm trying to think. So right now I've actually been trying to take a little bit of a break just from everything, because there's been a little bit of a lull, when it comes to stuff going on right now, do it kind of before the draft time. And this is kind of like the little bit of a dead period, unless of course there's some moves that are made, which they may very well could be at some point here. But yeah, I mean, so obviously the podcast, like I talked about earlier, you can find all that stuff over there pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts. So if it's YouTube, that's kind of the big thing for us. We also do Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all that stuff. You can find us on there. You can just search Bring the Juice Colts or Colts Podcast, and you'll find us there. And so you can personally find me, like I said, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter and Instagram at CPFelger55. I like to tweet out my thoughts sometimes on certain situations with the Colts, and like to have a little bit of fun too, realizing, hey, you know what? Like, you don't have to be always so serious on that platform. We can have a little bit of fun now and again. So yeah, that's where I'm kind of doing stuff right now in terms of content. So yeah.
All right. Sounds good to me. Truly thank you guys for tuning in tonight. It was a great show. Had a good time talking Colts ball, and a couple of important things there towards the end. So that's it for me. Thank you, Cody. Thank you for coming on. We'll be having Derek on next week. I re-messaged him, hoping to get him on, getting the dynamic duo on. So that's it for me. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back next week, Thursday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. This is the JW Sports Talk Show, signing off.